Welcome back. We're studying the Beis HaLevi's tractate on certainty that God Almighty is taking care of us at every moment and every time, the Maimar B'tachon, and we're up to the 19th paragraph, and we're going to pull it up on the screen over here. And we learned last week, we were talking about miracles, why there's not so many revealed miracles these days, because of the state of people's faith and belief in God, and certainty in God is taking care of them. So God doesn't want to take away our free choice. And now we continue over here. So we were saying that last time that this is we get to choose how much difficulty we want to have in bringing in the income that we need. And this is why, therefore, the that our sustenance comes, that our sustenance comes to us because of our great sins with great effort. We have to do a lot of striving. So what does it mean because of our great sins? Is it, is God walking around with a punishing stick saying, okay, you've got a scorecard of negative scorecard over here, so therefore it's going to be difficult for you? So really the greatest sin, so to speak, is our experience of feeling disconnected from God Almighty. That's the greatest transgression, meaning to say we're the ones that's suffering from it. We are causing our own suffering if we feel that we're separate from God, and that we feel that God doesn't care about us, or he's looking at us negatively, or he's upset at us. Then we are creating for ourselves a very unpleasant experience. And then that's what leads us to do things that are trying to fill the void. So it says, a person who is feeling separated from God is going to seek out temporal experiences in the world in order to try to fill that void, because he's not feeling that sense of being alive from just being alive and feeling God's presence with him. So now he's looking for other things. So all the sins that a person is going to do are all flowing from this one shift in mindset, and as to whether perception as to whether or not God is with me. And so we could see how this applies over here, meaning to say, he said, if we feel that God is with us and providing everything, then the income is going to come, and the income is going to come easily. If we decide that it requires great strain and great effort, then that's the way it's going to be. It's going to be based on our choice of mindset, our choice of our way we're looking at things. That's going to change the affect the way we're actually going to experience it. And so this affects then the amount of striving we have to do, this viewpoint. So if we have a viewpoint that we're separate and we're making choices based on that, then it's going to be a lot of striving. Because God Almighty sends us our sustenance wrapped and covered in the garment of labor. So we have to do something. We have to do some labor in order to get the sustenance, but that's just a cover story. That labor is just a cover story for the provision of the sustenance. And so why is he doing this? So this shouldn't be completely obvious to everyone that it's the Creator who is Zan, who's sustaining and providing for all living things. Now, we know that this comes back to our ability to choose how we look at the world. Now, we know if we study the book of Psalms, the King David says, he gives bread to all living flesh, and forever is your loving kindness. So we know this, that God is providing everything. Where else would it be coming from? The great creator and loving creator of the world and creator of each one of us at every instant is bringing us into existence. He's providing everything for us. So what is this cover story helping if we already know that? And the answer I want to suggest is that it's not necessarily a front of mind. We have a choice to perceive that, to see that with a capital SEE, to see the reality of what's that ever being provided for. Or we could say, oh no, it's this activity. We get this choice. It comes back down to the choice. And so if you were, so to speak, to have this food delivered, like let's say you were to have a, instead of a drive-through that you drive through and get your food, but the food was to drive through by you, like be a package that fell from the sky, God delivery. And now got your food there, you're going to be like, okay, well, this is coming from God. He's providing me my food, with like a little seal on it that says certified kosher by God. And this is where it's coming from. So now you're not going to have any choice of perception in the world. It's almost like we were saying before. It's a derivative or follow on from what we were saying before about what the impact the miracles have on us. So we would then see everything's coming from God, and then we would not have any choice to choose to see or not see God. And here we are basically showing us that the reason it comes wrapped in and covered in this garment of this outer packaging of having to do some work is that we then have a choice to see, oh, the work is not the real thing, it's really coming from God, or to believe and choose to believe that the work is the real generator of the sustenance. And the truth is that the striving and the labor is only a covering for our eyes to not see the great glory of God Almighty, His true awesomeness. And like it says in the tractate in the Talmud, Kedushin, the 82nd page on the first side, I did evil. He'oisi means I did evil, es ma'asai, with my actions. V'kipachti, and I lost, es parnasosi, I lost my income. So my actions, these choices of not seeing God is what's causing my income to go down. But the truth of the matter is that the labor does not help at all. That's a very strong statement. The labor is set up as a means for us to be provided a choice that we have to decide whether to see the labor as the cause and solution or problem if we're not doing enough labor, or to see whether God is really the source of the income and whether we're getting it is because of God Almighty. Amram, like the sages say, lo enius min ha'umanos, lo ashiros min ha'umanos, rak birkas Hashem hi ta'ashir. It's, the sages said, it's poverty is not from the skills and professions and the craftsmanship work, and the wealth is not from the skills in the profession and the craftsmanship work. Only the blessing of God Almighty, from that a person becomes wealthy, from that he will be successful. So we can really take this to heart. Now we're going to see in the next paragraph, which we're going to do next week, that he's saying, don't think to yourself that you don't have to do some labor, because that's what the God Almighty wants you to do, some labor. He wants you to show up for work, whatever that work is, whether it's sitting at home doing some work or going to a job, or whether it's whatever if you're doing some sort of effort in investments, whatever type of engagement you are doing in the world to be able to generate an income. You could be a teacher. You could do, there's many, obviously, an infinite number of things you could do. But so you do have to do something because that's the way God set it up. However, don't think for an instant that that is what's doing anything. That's not what's bringing the income. And this here is a really, really critical component of the last sentence we said, because so many of us grew up in families where, you know, you have to get a profession, you have to get a job, you have to do these kind of things, because the parents were really keen on this idea that based on a person's degree, based on a person's profession, that's what's going to bring their income. And therefore, that's a poor chinuch, it's a poor dedication into the service of God Almighty, because it's putting the child, this impressionable child, in thinking that that is the key. And the answer is, it's not the key. In fact, that does not help at all. And you could see that, you know, it's interesting. People think lawyers and doctors make, you know, fortunes. Well, the fact of the matter is, the average, a number of years ago, I don't know what it is today, but the average first year salary for a lawyer in the United States of America was $35,000. So if that's the average, that means that some people are making, you know, $200,000 a year at the big firms in New York, and some people are making a lot less than $35,000. So you have all this big degree, and you don't really have that much to show for it. In fact, you could suggest that this whole movement to forgive student loans is coming to show that the student loans are not, so the student loans which are being used to fund this so-called education in the universities and the degree getting and the certifications and so forth, is not actually producing income for the students. Because if a person was going to take out 100,000, the person makes a calculation before they're going to take out the student loans, and they're going to go to school, and that therefore they're going to have a result. They're going to be able to make a certain amount of income. So if they're going to take $100,000 in school loans, and they're going to make $100,000 a year for the next 10 years, then they should be able to pay off, let's say, $10,000 a year. 10% of their income they can pay to the school loans, and in 10 years they'll pay off their loans. Well, if they're failing to pay off their loans, it shows that the income is not as expected, is not as promised. So that shows us that this schooling and this labor and all this work that's being done to create these type of professions and create these type of you know, supposed skills and qualifications and so forth are not producing the financial results. And that is self-evident that it wouldn't do that. That's what we're learning right here. Beis HaLevi didn't need to see that. He knew that from in the 1800s. He understood, because Torah tells us it's not because of the skills, the craftsmanship, the education, the work of the labor and so forth. You could have a person that's all kinds of different circumstances. Some are doing well, some are doing poorly. Some with even exactly the same circumstances. One's doing well, one's doing poorly. So where is what makes the income is God Almighty. And that's what we really need to uncouple the people in the United States of America and around the world from, is this idea that this education is necessary to get ahead, that this schooling and really what's this 4 year of enlightenment and indoctrination is necessary somehow. That's not necessary to make a living. That's the lie that they're telling the parents to convince them to turn their children over to the priests of the Enlightenment. So they disconnect the parents from their connection to God Almighty, or have the parents perceive that they're disconnected from God Almighty, just enough so that they can convince the parents that their kids will not be well off. There's no one going to take care of them, so they better get an education and a degree so they could make their way in the world. Parents buy that, which is already a spiritual malady of the parents, that they bought that and therefore sent their kids to school, to these enlightenment indoctrination centers. And then the kid goes and is further, you know, directly swamped and flooded with enlightenment disinformation and enlightenment indoctrination. And now he's even more distant from his understanding of God Almighty. And now he's even more thinking that it's his degree and his own efforts and so forth that are going to make the difference in terms of his income. And it's just this downward spiral. And in the and what the Beis HaLevi is saying over here, this work does ein hamalocha ma'ila klum. It has no help whatsoever. God Almighty is going to provide for you, is going to provide for your children, and it is not dependent on the degree. It's not dependent on a particular profession or a particular line of work or a particular line of business. We need to understand and reconnect ourselves to God Almighty, and that will save people's spiritual existence by not exposing themselves to the chilling and freezing influence of the Enlightenment indoctrination, and will save them a fortune in schooling fees, and will save the rest of the taxpayers the fortune of money that they're going to want the rest of the population taxpayers to pay to bail out these people who were misled into thinking that it was going to be to their benefit to go to these indoctrination institutions and borrowed a tremendous amount of money, but the money's not coming from the work they're doing, not actually showing up, because there's no connection between their education and their income, and therefore the whole taxpayers as a whole are going to be burdened with this obligation. So it's a complete scam of fooling people in by creating that wedge in our thinking that God is not going to take care of us. We have to get this degree, we have to get this profession, we have to get this this skill set. By creating that little bit of wedge in our thinking, then it creates greater and greater wedge in our thinking that between us and our experience of God Almighty is with us, and our certainty that God Almighty is with us. And the next thing a person knows is he's hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and he has barely any income, and now he's underwater, but he put himself underwater because he bought the lie in the first place. So that's why we have to learn this tractate on Emunah and faith and action. This tractate on being certain that God Almighty is with us at every moment, taking care of us. We won't fall for the lies. We will immediately recognize when someone's coming to drive a wedge. They're like, okay, you could believe in God, but you got to know that you got to have this degree. So it sounds like they're not denying that you could believe in God and trust in God, but they're then selling you this other solution. We got to separate ourselves from any of that type of thinking and truly go through the day, go to sleep at night, wake up in the morning, go through the day certain that God Almighty is going to take care of us. It's not dependent on our actions. We must show up in the world to do some labor. We're going to discuss that more next week. But that is not where the source of the income is coming from. That's not where the source of our sustenance. The sustenance is coming from God Almighty. And it's even set for us at the beginning of the year, set for us in advance. God Almighty tells us, it makes a decision what each person is going to make. So, God bless you. Any questions? Okay. Have a beautiful week, and we'll speak next week. We'll learn together. Take care.
Thanks, Rabbi. Have a nice day.
Next week, we're not going to have a class Thursday morning at 9 o'clock because it's going to be the day after the wedding. So,
Okay.
Okay, I'll put that in the email that goes out. Okay, take care. Good to see you.